Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to save this role, which is admin1, and I'm selecting here with his permission. So I want to assign this to the user I'm creating, yeah? So the next step is going here in the store method, yeah, and here we gonna get the data from the form and save it. So if you remember, we have the view, which is this create, through this form. This has a post request, and this is the route we are calling, which is the store method on this user controller, which is this one, yeah. So here is where we want to get the data, receiving the data, apart from the name, email, and password, which are we are set it up here on this fields. So have name, email, and password. Then we want to select this role, yeah, add the role and permission. So let's see how we can assign these permissions, this role and permissions to this user. So first of all, let's do a dd numpy and see what we're receiving through the request. So let me try this. So refresh this. Just add some data here. Let's do test 11, for example, as a test. So let's do a password. Repeat the password, and here let's select, for example, admin1. Let me check those two permissions. If I click submit now, let me close that. If I go to request and parameters, you can see I have the role, well, the ID of the role that I'm gonna need. This is a part of the data I'm sending: the name, the email, and the password. So we have the role ID, and then we have the permissions. You see, this is an array. And why is that? Because you remember we have specified that this arrived as through an array. So how we have done this? If we go to the view here, for permissions, you see we have this div, but remember that we have set it up this through the jQuery using this for it. So you see this is what is creating the checkbox, yeah, for the permissions. So here you see these permissions. This what does is creating an array with square brackets, yeah. So inside of these permissions, I'm gonna have, so the inside of this I'm gonna have an array, which should be called permissions. And so remember, this is very important. Those square brackets, yeah, specify that we creating an array. So if I look inside this here, I get the IDs, yeah. So the ID of the permissions, because we need to relate those permissions with the role. If we go to the database, you see, if I refresh this, you can see we have those permissions, which are the last two, you see, 24 and 25. Okay, so this is how we send this data to the store method. So now we have this in this request variable, and we can use it now here. And right, is this request variable here. So now let's use this variable and save the permission, the role for this user. So let me just delete this dd, and here after this after I save the user, so first I'm validating the data, then I'm saving the user. So here I'm gonna add my code where I'm gonna save the role and the permissions for this user. So this code, what I'm doing, I'm checking that the request role is different than null, so it means that we have selected a role for this user. So if we select a role, then we're gonna execute what is inside of this condition. So what it's doing is creating the relation with using the attach method. So this role is the relation with the users, and then I'm using the attach method, and then I'm adding the role, which is the role that is coming from the form. Remember, so you see, is this one here, which role? This is the name I've added for the role, right? So first I'm creating the relation, which is this one here, and then for the role, yeah, using the attach method, and then I'm saving this relation, right? So so the role is creating, so this is creating the relation between the user and role. So let's do the permissions as well. So I have this code here. What I'm doing, I'm checking as well that there is if there is any permission selected. Yeah, so this is negation. If it's not equal to null, means that we have selected a permission for this role. Means it's not empty, it's not null. Yeah. Then I'm creating a for each, because I'm gonna receive. If you remember, we are sending an array, right? So that's why we need to use a for each, because we have more than one permission. Even if we have one, will be in an array. Yeah. So for each permission, we are gonna create a relation, right, with this user. So inside of the for each, I'm using this request permission, which is through this permission role that is coming from the form. Then I'm using the permission variable that I have created in the for each, and then here I'm creating the relation as in the role as well. Yeah, we have done it in the role. And this is creating in the user's permissions. So this is where we are creating that relation. And for the role, you see this here, we are creating, so this one here, see this one here, we are creating it in the user's roles, right, which is this one here. Just to bear in mind where we are saving this. So then we are so here I'm setting the relation, and here I'm saving. Okay, so this is the code that we use to save the role and the permission. Actually we are creating relation between roles and users, and permission is users, because we have already roles and permissions saved in database, and what we're doing here is just creating relations with the user, right? So if everything is correct now, this last line we are sending back to the users. So if I save this, and let's see if it's let's test it. So I go back, let me see. Well, I need to save this, so remember to save it. Go back, refresh this, and so let me, for example, now let's create a new user. Let's create this user test11. Okay, so add the password here. Repeat the password, and let's select here this role. Let's checkbox this, check this permission. If I do submit, you see I got this user, and I've got the role and permission that we had to we have to see them here. Later on we're gonna do this, but to be able to see if this was created, let's check in the database. So this is ID 8 of this user, right? So let's go to the users table. Let's refresh this. So you see we have the user with the ID number 8. If I go to user roles and refresh this, you see I have the user with ID 8 has the role which is the role 1. So if I go here, remember we have selected the role admin 1 which has the ID 1. Let's go to users permissions, refresh this. So you see we have those two permissions. You see this relation is created already with which we have. So we have 24, 25, which is the ID of the permissions of those permissions. So if I refresh this, you see these are those two. So this was created correctly. So this is working now. What I want to do now is let me show you. If I go to view, I want to bring here the roles for each of the users and the permissions they have, right? And this way we can see what roles and what permissions each of the users has. Yeah. So if I go to index, you see I have this those two columns in the table, and this is the role and this permissions. It's just simple text. So what I'm gonna do here, for example, let's I'm gonna create a for each. Yeah, so and then before I create this for each, let me check that we have roles assigned to this user. So because if I leave it without, we can have some errors, right? So let me use this variable. So inside of this for each, I have to do user and then use the relation, right, which is roles. Remember, this is users. It's an instance of the user. So let me see if I go to the user model, actually to the role, no, to the user. Here we have the trait. So let's go to this trait, and so this instead of this trait, you see we have these relations for the roles and for the permissions, so we can use this. So let's go back to the view, the index, and here I am using, you see, this role is the relation, and then I can use here role, and this way I can bring the role, the relation of the role with this user, right? So let's create now spam, for example, and through the variable role and create a class, bootstrap class, and I'm just adding batch, and then batch secondary, and this is a color, and then I'm gonna show, let me call the name of the role through the variable role. So using the role variable and then the name, right? And this should bring the role for the user, right? So let me save this. If I go to the view here, if I refresh this, you see I have the roles for the user. So well, this doesn't have any role, just the last one we have added, right, which has admin 1. So this is a role that this user has, but later on we're gonna create more roles and we're gonna assign them. Yeah. So well, let me just add the condition here just to make sure we don't get any error. So this is checking that there is not empty the roles, right? You can do this if you want. because this can bring some error. So let's do for permissions as well. So let's do the same, but we have to check, we have to change, instead of roles, we gonna use the permissions relation, yeah? So let me paste this code, and as you can see, it's just, it's the same. I'm checking that the permissions is not empty, and then I'm using a for each, going through each of the permissions, using the relation that is this one, permissions, using from the trait, and then using this variable, creating a new spam and calling the name of the permission, right? So it's very simple. So now if I save this and go to the view, let me save this first and go to the view. If I refresh this, you see, we can see the permissions as well. So this is the role and these are the permissions. So as you can see, this is working perfectly. So we can see now each of the roles and all the permissions for the users. Okay, so now let's take this view, edit and delete, and because now we are not gonna delete or view just the users, but we're gonna edit as well the permissions and the roles. Yeah, so we need to delete those for each of the user, because remember we was creating the relations with the permissions and the roles, with the roles and permission for the user. So before we do that, let's go with this view. If I click on this view, and we can view the user details. So here we have this section which should show the role, and here permissions. And later on we're gonna see the number of the posts for each of the user. Right, so let's do this one for the role and the permission. So let's show for each of the user the role and the permission. So if we go here, we have the show method here inside of the user controller. So what this does is bring us, show us, well, it's calling this view, and we send the user instance, so the instance of the user we want to see, right? So if we go to this view, we don't have to send anything because we have everything in this variable. Yeah, just bear in mind. So we can bring the relation for the roles and the permission for this user in that variable. So let's go to the view now. If I go here in the show view, yeah, this is the file where we showing the detail of the user. So here is for the role, and here is for the permission. So what we have to do here, we have to do something similar we have done here for this section, right? But this is for the user. Okay, so this is for each of the user, but here in this page will be for each of the user, for separated for specific user. So here let's go index to this page and just copy this code. I'm going to change something on this code, but it's something similar we have to do, right? So let me just copy this line, this group of code, and then I will copy the second group of code for the permission. So first one is for the roles, which is this one here. Copy and paste it here. Okay, so now I need, let me just arrange this a little bit, and this is the same, but what I need to do here, you see, I have the same variable. You see, we are using here to bring the name, the email, yeah, and then I'm gonna call the relation, which is the relation with the roles. I'm checking here first that is not empty, and then I'm using a for each, and I'm bringing the name of the role for the specific user, for this specific user. So let me copy this for the permission as well, and I'm gonna paste it here, and as you can see, let me just arrange a little bit, and this should work as without any problem, right? So if everything is correct, if I save this and refresh the page, because this is because I don't have any role and permission for this role. So let me go back and open one which has permissions in role. So let me just view this, for example, that we have a role assigned it already and permission. So you see, now we can see the role, which is this one, and we can see the permissions. This is a simple design, just you can make use of it, or you can build your own design, but this is as an example to be able to understand this, how this works. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're gonna use a different design for yours, but I think this is a good example to be able to carry on with this. Okay, so let's add some color to this yeah, for this role and these permissions. So we just simply add just adding some classes. So let me just go to the view, and if I go to this spam, let me just go here and change this for the secondary. I'm gonna do here different one. I'm gonna do primary, and then let's success this one. Okay, so let me say yes. Okay, so as you can see, it's a little bit better, so a bit colorful. Okay, so this is done. Now what we can do, let's do this edit. Yeah, so this small icons. So if I click on edit here, yeah, so I can edit the user, but I need to edit the roles and the permission, right? So you see, we have in the create, we have already this section where we can select the role and select the permissions, but this is in create. But we need to add this for the update, right? So we need to edit this if we want to change any role or any permission. You see, we have this email name, email, password, but we need to add the role here or under the password, and then the permission as well. So if we go to the controller here, we have this edit method. So what this method does, we are calling the edit view, right, which is this one here, and then we're gonna send this instance of the user, which is good for edit the user. But now to be able to edit the permissions and the role for this user, we need to do something else, right? So we have this instance of the user, which we can use the relations of the roles and the permissions, which we have inside of this trait as roles and permissions. So these are those relations, right? Roles and permissions. But what I need to do, let me just go here. If I go here to the this is edit, let's go to the user and let's go to create. Remember, we have let's suppose that this is edit. The user has roles and permission assigned already. So what I need to do, I need to send all the roles that are in the database, and then I need to select the role that the user has in the permission and show them selected on the edit page, right? For example, let's say that this role, so each of the roles has their permission, so we need to show the permissions for specific role, all the permissions, and select those ones that the user has selected or has assigned it to him in the database, right? So let's go step by step and understand this. So first of all, we need to bring all the roles, because we need to show all the roles, right, and the edit page. So let's create a variable which I'm going to call it roles, and then I'm going to call the role model, and then I'm going to use the get method. So what this does will bring all the roles, right? So I need to send this to the view. So let me just create another item inside of this array. So I'm just gonna call it role, and then I'm gonna call the variable roles. Let me just add the s here as well because it's plural. Yeah, so let's add a comma here. Okay, so now we have roles. We want to send this, so we send this to the view. The next we need to do, we need to find the role that the user has already, right? So let's, for example, well, you can do this in various ways, but I'm gonna do it like this. So let's create a variable user role, and inside of this variable, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get the role that the user has. So I'm going to use the variable user and then relation roles, and then I have a method that's is called first, and this is bringing the first role that is found for this user, right? So now we have the role that this user has. So let me check with the dd. I'm gonna paste this variable, and these variables, this is an instance of the role model that the user has. So let's bring the name of the role that the user has. So let me save this. If I go here and refresh the page, and let's click on the edit, you see I can see the name of the role that this user has already, right? This is assigned to this user. So for these ones we don't have any, so we're gonna create or assign later on to be able to view more examples. So let me just comment this, and let me copy this variable and let me use it here because I need this in the view, so I need to send this as well in the view. So let me just create another item and assign the value of this. So what I need to bring now, the permissions, all the so I need to bring all the permissions for the role that the user has. So this is the role that this user has, right? This is assigned to this user, but this role has multiple permissions, and I need to show all the permissions, yeah, because we can have all the permissions assigned to this user for this role, or just a few of them, right? So I need to bring them, all of them first, and then we're gonna identify what permission has this user, right? Okay, so now let me create another variable, and I'm gonna call it role permission, and then I'm gonna use this variable which has the instance of the role for this user, and what I want to do, I need to bring all the permission for the role that this user has. So inside the role model, which is through this relation from the user, so I should create inside the role model another method that will bring all the permissions. Well, I just realized that this function shouldn't be created because we can use the permissions one, which is the above one. I mean, you can use either the first one, permissions, or the last one, which is this one I'm creating, which is called all role permissions, right? But they are pretty much the same. So I just realized that I shouldn't create this. But as I said, this shouldn't affect our code. As this video was recorded already, I couldn't change it because this would give me a lot of work to do. Just bear in mind, if you realize that are the same, I just realized myself as well, because I created twice with different name. But it's okay. You can use either the first one or the second one. So once I have this created, what this will bring all the permissions for the role that the user has. So I'm going to use the last one, as I have already created. So I'm going to call it here and use it here. So all role permissions all the permissions for the role are called through this method. We're bringing all the permissions for the role using this method, right? So now this variable, if we check it with dd, let me show you, if I uncomment it, uncomment this line and put the variable. Let me just uncomment it and I'll show you what this will bring. So refresh this page and go to the edit. If I click on this, well, I have this, there is a S missing here. Okay, so now if I go back, refresh this, you see I have an array of objects, which each object is the permission for this role, right? Okay, so once we have this, what do we need to do? We need to send it to the view. So if I go here to edit, to the edit method, let me just copy this variable and send it to the view, and then I'm going to use a for each to show all these permissions, right? Okay, so let me add this or send this to the view. So I'm creating another index, role permissions, and then paste this variable to this index value, right? So we have the roles, all the roles. We have the role that the user has, right? And we have all the permissions that this role has, right? So what I need to do now, I need the permissions that the user has assigned through this role, right? So let me just create a variable, users permissions, and you're gonna understand this, how this works. So I'm gonna use the variable user, and then I'm gonna call the relation of the permissions. So this is this permissions, and what this will bring all the permissions that this user has. So let's send this to the view, right? And now we have everything we need to create that section of the permissions, the roles and the permissions, and then to be able to edit them, right? But first we need to show what the user has already by selecting them on the edit page. So if I go to the view of the edit page, here I'm gonna add my code to be able to view those permissions, the role and the permissions that the user has selected, and I can change them. Yes, if I go to a create page, you see we have already this, which is done by using a JavaScript, a jQuery code. So we need to use something similar in the edit page, right? So let me just copy the jQuery from this create page, because this will be pretty much similar, pretty much the same. So copy this, and I'm gonna paste it in the edit page here. So once we have this, now the next step is to add the div. Well, add the div where we're gonna have the roles, where we can select the role, right? So we need to bring all the roles, and then we're gonna select the one that the user has. So I'm gonna paste this code, and this is a select element. Yeah, and inside of this select element, I'm using the role array and using a for each to show all of them. Yeah, as options. You see, through this variable roles, which I'm sending from this method. You see, is this one here. Remember, we have all the roles here. Yeah, then I'm sending to the view. So I'm using here the for each to show all the roles using these variables, and then I'm using the option, right? And as attributes inside of this option element, I'm using as well the custom data attributes because this will be used in JavaScript, yeah, to be able to identify the role that we are gonna change or select. In this case, update. So as well, we have the value of the role, which is set it in the value attribute, right? And the tricky part now is to identify or select the role that the user has. So I have here two conditions. This is the first one, this is the second one. So first, I'm checking that both has to be one of this has to be true, and is one of those is true. I'm showing nothing, but if it's not true, I'm showing this select attribute, which what this does is selecting the role inside of the list, the option of the role. So first is checking the user has role and has a role, and the second I'm taking the name of the role. Remember, this is a for each. So in any role, I'm passing for all the roles. So I'm checking that the first that the role name is equal with the role that the user has. So this means that if it's not equal with this, means it's not selected. So I'm showing nothing. If selected, I'm showing selected attribute, which means we'll select that role and show that this is the one the user has, right? So this will make sense in one moment, but let me just go and save this and test it, and you understand what this means. So next code I'm gonna paste here. Let me paste that, and what is this is just the box where I'm showing the permissions, right? So these are the ID of the divs where I am using them inside of the jQuery, yeah. If you remember, for the create view, this is similar. And I need to add another code, which is this one, yeah. So what this code does, what I'm doing here, I'm checking that the user has permissions, right? If the user has permissions, I'm showing all inside of this all the divs, yeah. So I'm using this for each, and then I'm showing all the roles. Remember, we have set it up like the method that we said that doesn't need to create it. So I'm using this one. You can use this one or the other one, but it's the same, yeah. So I need to show first all the permissions, and then is the variable I'm showing for each, and inside I have the inputs, which are the checkboxes, and then I'm creating the name permissions as an array, because I need to send this back to the controller. And once we update the permission, we need to send them as an array, if you remember, yeah. We have done it in create, and then we have here the ID, which is a slug, and then I'm setting the value using the ID of the permission. So the last part is basically I'm using in array. I'm checking that the ID of the permission that is inside of the for each, meaning that all the permissions that are selected for the specific role, I'm checking that the ID. So we pass through all the permission for this role, and we bring the ID, and this is the ID. Yeah? And then I'm taking the IDs. The IDs inside of this line, we are getting all the IDs of the permissions that the user has, and I'm putting this in an array using the to array, and then the plug. If I go to the documentation, what plug does, basically I'm specifying, and you see if you read here, it says what this does. It's selecting specific data by using a key inside of the array. For example, here we use the name, and you can see here we'll select all the items with the name ID, the values. We are getting the values, but we're using the key. So here we are using the ID. We are specified that we need the IDs, the value of the ID, right? This will be an array of the IDs of the permissions that the user has, and anytime I'm inside of this for each, I'm checking between those two IDs of permissions, and this way I'm finding that this permission is it is assigned to this user. So if it is, I'm showing check it. If not, I'm showing nothing. And let's go now. See here I'm referring to these check boxes here. So for each of the permission that the user has already, so we're gonna show them check it, right? Well, let's test this. And you're gonna understand better once we check it. Once we test it. Okay, so this is what this code is doing, showing all the permissions, and the permission that the user has will show check it, right? I hope this makes sense. We will understand this once we are testing it, but once we are going to see how this will be on the view. But before we do that, let me explain a little bit this jQuery. So here, you see I'm setting some variables for the boxes where I'm showing the permissions, right? This is the full box, and this is the list of the permissions. I'm hiding the box, the full box, and then I'm saying here on change of the role. So I'm getting the ID of the role box, which is this one here, and I'm saying on change. So every time this will change, I'm gonna select different role. I'm gonna execute what all inside of the function, right? So this means on change. This on change means every time the role is changing, then I'm gonna execute this. So this first line, I'm finding the selected one, and I'm setting in the variable role, and then I'm setting the role ID from the custom attribute data, which is role ID, data role ID, and the slug data role slug I just added. But you can delete it. I don't use it. I have tested something before. Then I have permission checkbox list. I'm emptying this div. So every time I'm selecting a role, I'm emptying the list, the box of the checkbox permissions, right? With the checkbox permissions, and then I'm using this Ajax. And what I'm doing here, I'm just calling this root, specifying the request, specifying the type of the data, and then I have the data which I'm sending. The main data I'm using is the role ID, right? And this is I'm able to identify the the ID of the roles, and this is the response. So if I scroll down here, this is the response. This will be a JSON format data using this parameter of the function, data. I'm using this console log to show some data, what data is coming back, just for information. And then I have this permission box, which I want to show the box. Okay, so then the data, as it will be an array of objects in JSON format, I go on each of them using the each function, which is this one here. So passing through each element inside of the data, and I'm appending this HTML code with the values that each data item has. For example, slug, name, and I have the ID as well here. So I need to set up this again, because once I'm gonna click submit again, I need those values to identify the permission, right, that I'm checking for this role, for this user, right? So I hope this makes sense for you. It sounds a little bit confusing, but if you go slowly, you'll be able to understand this. Before I go and test this, I need to add some extra things here. For example, I have the permission box and permission checkbox list, but I do have as well the user permission box, which is this one here. So what I need to do, I need to select this, because I need to empty it. I need to empty it once I select different roles. So I'm gonna create a variable, which I'm gonna call it this way. It should be similar to the name user permission box. Okay, so once I have this variable, I'm gonna assign that ID of the div. Now I have selected this, and I need to empty this user permission box. So we need to empty this anytime we select a role. So on change here, you see the role. This is identified on here, right? So anytime I'm changing this option, I want to execute this code that is inside, on this line inside of the function. So I want to execute this. So I add this line because I want to empty that div anytime I'm selecting different role. So user permission box has to be emptied, and as well this permission checkbox list. Okay, so let me save this. If I go to the browser, if I refresh the page, and let me go and edit one of them. So let me edit this one, which is has already roles and permission. You see, now I can see the role that this user has is selected already in the select list. You see, it's showing here. I hope this is making sense now, because this is showing the role that I have, and as well we have the permissions selected. So I have all the permissions for this role, which is admin 1 in this case, but I need to check just the permissions that this user has. Now you remember. I hope now makes sense what I have explained before. You see here I show the permission for the user, but this role has more permissions that this user has assigned. You see, like here, like you can see here. So you see this is working to show these roles and permission for the user, but I need to add the functionality to be able to update these values. So if we go to the controller, users controller, and here we have the method update. So we have here the validation, then we are setting the name, the email, we are setting the password here, and then the last one, which is this one, we are saving. So this user is saved in the table user, yeah, but we need to add the roles and the permission for this user, right? We in the relation tables, if you remember, we have these two tables, which is the users roles and users permission. So it's here where we need to save our relations or update our relations. So first we need to delete the old ones and add the new relations, right? So that's the steps we need to do. So first, let's delete the relation that is already there. So let me use the request and see what we are receiving through the request. So if I do a dump and die dd and use this variable, if I save this and go to the browser, if I refresh the page now and let me select something extra or change a little bit this data and you do submit, you see inside of the request I have the parameters that I'm sending through the form. So here is the data that I'm sending first, and then I have the role and permissions. So role has the ID and the permissions has as well the ID of the permissions, which is inside of this array, right? And let's now do this. So if I delete this now, let me add the code, because now we know what we are receiving through the from the form. So first I need to delete the relation that are already in the database. So I'm creating a user, or I'm using the variable user and then the role, and then I'm using the method detach. If you need more documentation about this method, if you go to Laravel documentation here, if we search for the detach, well, basically what this is doing is deleting a pivot table, a pivot relation, well, in a relation inside of a pivot table, right? So if you read through this, you're gonna understand what this does. It's just deleting the relation, yeah, the item, the record in the relation table. So I'm deleting this role. Let me copy this and paste it again, because I need to change this with permissions, right? Because I need to delete the relations of the permissions. So well, I need to add an essay because this is a roles, because if you remember, if I go to the user model, inside of this we have this trait. If you remember, we have inside of the trait we have these relations which we are using to bring or update our roles and permissions, right? So just make sure we are understanding and we know what where this is coming from. So here what we're doing, we are deleting the old relations with the roles and the permission for this user, right? I hope this makes sense now. Okay, so once we have this deleted, what do we need to do? We need to add them again, right? The new ones. So I'm going to paste the code here, and what I'm doing here, I'm checking that the request role is not equal with null. So we have a role that is selected, right? So which is this one here. This request role is not null, meaning that this is coming with a role selected. And if it's true, then we're executing that what inside here. So what I'm doing, I'm using the roles relation and I'm using the method attach. And what this does is the reverse of detach, which is saving this relation which I'm setting here, I'm sending as a parameter, and then I'm saving, and the last thing I'm saving. So this is for the role, and I need to do for the permissions, which is something similar. So I paste this code, and what I'm doing, I'm checking that the request permissions is different to null. And then, if you remember, we have a array coming from the form, and you are using this for each to save each of the permissions, right? Because this permissions is an array. I'm passing on each item of the array, and then I need to save one by one of the permission using the attach method. And I'm passing here the permission that I want to save or relate, create the relation for this user, and I'm saving this, right? So I hope this makes sense. So this is very simple now. If I save this now and go to the browser here, if I go back and refresh this, and let's try this. For example, let's update this. So let me add this admin one delete. So if I do submit, as you can see here, I have added the delete permissions apart the one we already had. Right, so let me edit another one. For example, this one. I have an error here. If I go back here, let me see. Other permissions, object. Okay, so let me go here up. You see here this line of code. If the user doesn't have any role, so this will these roles will bring rules, and inside of this variable will be a null. So I don't use this all role permissions method, right? For those that doesn't have any role at the beginning. So what I need to do, let me check first what this is bringing me. So let me use a dd, and then I'm using the I'm checking what is this variable has. So these are for those who doesn't have roles. So if I do refresh, you see, for those that doesn't have any role, you see, if I go edit, it's coming with null. But for this one, it's coming with values, right? So I need to escape this, do a check, a condition here to make sure that I don't get that error. So let me delete this. So I need to do if this variable is different than the null, means that the user has a role, and then I'm setting this variable. Else I'm just setting this variable as a null. I think this is a quick fix. So I'm sending this to the view, which is this one here, and this if the user doesn't have any role, or is returning null actually, well, I don't need to show anything. So if I go now to the view, let me just go to the view, which is the edit one. So here is where I'm using this variable, you see, and I need to add a condition here. So let me, for example, let's do another if here. If use at in front, and if, and here as a condition I need to say that if role permissions is different of null, well, I'm showing this box with the permissions. And with this we have done a quick fix for that error, right? So if I refresh this and go back to one of them, you see, I can see the permissions, the roles and the permissions. But if I go with to one which is empty, you see, I don't have any error, but I have the role that I can select roles, and if I select the role, the permissions are showing for the role I'm selecting, right? So this is working correctly. So let me add to this, for example, to this user. So this is new test user, and let me add the admin1 role and add some permissions for those two. You see, this is updated, this is created correctly, this has this role and this permission. So let me add another one, for example this one, and let me select the permissions. So if I click submit, you see I have the roles and the permissions, so this is working correctly. Okay, so the next step we need to do, delete, to do the delete of the roles and the permissions. So now we can delete users, right? But once we are deleting a user, we need to delete the roles and the permissions, which are the relations for the roles, and then for each of the permissions with the specific user. So if I go to the code here, we have already the destroy method, and what we can do here, so using the user variable, and then let's call the relation. For example, let's do for the roles, let me just call the roles, and then through this we can use the detach method. Remember, this detach method, what it's doing is deleting the relation. So if you go to the documentation, you can find what this method does, but basically this will delete the relation inside of the pivot table. So if I go to the database here, we have those relations, which are users roles and user permissions. So let's see what user we have. So let's say we have this one, the user 12 and the role 1 or ID 1. So for the permission as well, we have this user ID, which is user 12, and these are the ID for the permissions. So you can see we have this ID, which is 12 for the user, right? And if I go to roles, the ID of the admin 1 is 1. So this is what we have just saw before, which is this relation, right? And for the permission is something the same, something similar. So let's do for permission as well here. So let me use the user, and then calling the permissions relation, and then let's call again the detach method, which is, as I said before, is deleting the relation in the pivot table from the user, for the user with the permissions, right? So if I go to users, in the if I go here and let's say, for example, if I delete this one, we have to be able to delete the relation, and inside of the user permission we need to see this deleted as well. Yeah, those three relations. So let's see and test it. If I click on this one, okay, just click delete here, and now the user is deleted. It doesn't exist, this user, but let's see the relation if are deleted. So if I refresh this, you see this relation doesn't exist anymore. Let's update this one. You see those three as well, they was deleted. Okay, so now we have all ready to be able to use these roles and permissions. I have had some changings here, which are the roles and permissions. I have added some realistic names, so like admin, manager, user, content editor, and so we can add more if we need. But to be able to test with this one will be okay. And as well, we have created new permissions, right? And another thing I have changed are the names of the users. So we have added more realistic names, and we have assigned I have assigned some roles and some permissions to be able to test it. If you like this video, please give a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our channel.